Lilstarnerd, my name is Al or Lilstarnerd, and welcome to another episode of Marker Overload. Today we are doing something terrifying, but also very exciting. This video is sponsored by Ohuhu, who has kindly sent me a giant set of markers. Literally a giant set of markers. This is their Honolulu series of 320 colors. 320 colors. Not only is it 320 colors, but it's 320 brush markers. For reference, this is the set that I had before. I think it's like 216 or something like that. Here's this one. This video is not a review of these markers. I did that before with my previous set. I'll leave that in the iCard so you can check that out if you're interested. But spoiler alert, I love the markers. They're great markers. I absolutely recommend them to anyone looking for an alcohol marker. Not only are they a great cheap alternative to Copics, but they're also just like great on their own without even comparing them to Copics. They are my go-to to use and I genuinely enjoy working with them. So we're not reviewing these markers. Instead, we're taking on a challenge. A lot of other artists who have this 320 set have made videos using every single color in one piece. And today, I thought it would be fun to take on that challenge. We are going to be using every color in this 320 set to create one art piece. Oh my god. The thing is, I didn't want to just pick a random reference photo and try to force colors into the photo. I didn't want to just pick up a color and do a tiny little dot on the paper just to say that I've used it. I want to make sure that I utilize each individual marker, or at least attempt to. So I had to find a reference photo that would work, something colorful and big, and I think I found the perfect one. I've already got the sketch done and I am super excited about it. It's of a Guatemalan street market and this reference photo is perfect. There are a bunch of baskets of bright, colorful fruit and vegetables, so many detailed figures, and lots of vibrant and saturated fabrics. And, it's a big scale, it's a big piece of paper. And I am just hoping that with this much real estate, we can use every single marker. I haven't color coordinated them in the case yet because I have a strategy that I think is gonna work really well. I'm going to pull out each individual marker, swatch it, see what color it is, and then find its place in the piece. And then once I'm done and I've emptied the case, I can put them all back in, color coordinated as it's meant to be. So this is either gonna go weirdly fast or take all day. So let's get started. First of all, let me say that this was not easy. I was really hoping that this method of picking up one marker at a time and making a mark and whatever would somehow magically be super effective and fast. I planned on filming top down the entire time and time-lapsing the footage so you could see me pick out and use each marker and watch the bucket slowly empty. But oh my god, I pretty quickly gave up on that because this process was so slow. It took so much thought and consideration for each marker that what I thought would be a 30-second process per marker was like a 5-minute one. So I wanted to film the entire piece, but I quickly realized that that would be physically impossible because I just couldn't record and store that much footage. So there are segments that get really repetitive that I stopped filming at. The first day, I spent about 7 or 8 hours working on this, and then I had to stop for the night, and I worked another 2 or 3 hours the next day. So, yeah, a lot of drawing time. I don't think I've ever spent this long on a marker piece, ever. This was crazy for me, honestly. I normally am a pretty fast worker, I'm just constantly in a rush to do everything. This was really interesting because I think it really forced me to slow down and be a lot more thoughtful about the process instead of just going on muscle memory and instinct and stuff, So, like I said, it took a really long time. I think there are ways that I could have made this go a little faster. For one, it could have been a smaller piece. I think the larger paper was really vital in order to avoid the redundant mark making and layering. Having a smaller paper would have made my personal goals for this challenge a lot harder, but it would have made it go by a lot faster. I also think it might have been a good idea for me to organize the markers by color first. It seemed unnecessary to do that in the beginning. Like, what difference would it make if I'm just doing one marker at a time anyways? But in hindsight, it probably would have helped me see the future a bit, like plan a bit better. Like, I would go through all the greens and then think I was done, so I'd cover the last of the green areas, and then like an hour later, I would find another green marker I hadn't noticed before, and I would desperately have to find a place to use it that would actually make a difference. If I had just sorted all the colors first, I would have been able to see how many green markers I had and leave enough space to use all of them from the beginning. You know what I mean? So in the beginning, it seemed kind of unnecessary and stupid, but yeah, in hindsight, I definitely think it would have helped to, I don't know, be more effective and a little bit more efficient. But I can't see myself doing this challenge again anytime soon, if at all, ever. So I guess I don't really need to, keep that in mind or whatever. But if any of you guys are considering trying this, maybe it's helpful information to have. I think this actually was a really fun and interesting challenge and gave me reason to actually use and swatch every marker. When I have a lot of one supply, I tend to get overwhelmed and accidentally stick to just a few of them and never get to appreciate all the other ones. So this really forced me to look at and appreciate and utilize every marker, which was really cool. And I found some new colors that I absolutely love and definitely want to use in future pieces. Plus, it was just like a fun, cool challenge to do. I've been loving giving myself these little challenges lately. It kind of mixes stuff up and it gives you a reason to do something different, do something fun, just livens up your art practice in general. So yeah, overall, I would honestly recommend you guys try out this challenge just for funsies. But, to do so, you're gonna need a giant pack of markers. So let's talk a bit about these markers and Ohuhu in general. This 320 pack is insane. Like I said in the intro, I previously had the 216 set, and I thought that was a lot of markers. This set has literally every color you could possibly need. I think what's great about having so many color variations, especially when some of them are really similar, is that you can use up a marker and it won't even matter because you have a bunch of other options that look really close to replace it, So you can go ham with these markers and not feel guilty or bad or scared to quote-unquote waste them. I won't go into a full in-depth review of these markers because it will just be me repeatedly saying, they're so good, they're so great, I love them. Just know that I feel really positive about pretty much every aspect of Ohuhu markers, from the barrel design to the nibs, to the case, to ink flow, to performance. This set of markers is $244.99, which is insane. Do you understand how cheap that is for this many markers? That is 76 cents per marker. Copics are $8 a marker. $8. Oh my God. This price point for these markers and the performance of these markers, how high quality they are, it's insane. It's insane. And I love that. They've got a whole bunch of other sets of markers as well, ones that aren't quite so big, and they've got a Black Friday deal going on. Until November 29th, you can get up to 50% off a whole bunch of their products, so definitely be sure to go check out that sale, which will be linked down below, as well as this specific set of markers and all of Ohuhu's socials. Make sure you check them out, and seriously, if you're looking for a good alcohol marker set or brand to invest in, or a cheap alternative to Copics, or a cool new supply to try out, I really recommend Ohuhu's brush markers. These are my go-to markers. You guys have seen me use them in a lot of my videos. I genuinely really like them and recommend them to pretty much anyone. So anyways, back to this piece. So this paper was pretty big, like I mentioned, which again was purposeful to have more of that real estate. I really didn't want to end up just putting the same color on top of itself over and over to, use the marker, or just draw a few little dots or circles with one marker just to say that I used it, even though the mark really didn't make an impact in the piece. I really thought that I would be able to avoid that, but man, 320 markers is a lot. I tried really hard to avoid it, but it definitely happened with some of the colors, especially the greens, and then again towards the end with the grays and darker tones. At first, in the process, I was being pretty conservative with the marks I was making, but I also wanted to use the marker significantly enough to make a point, have an impact. But I didn't want to cover the paper within the first hour or two of the project. But about a quarter of the way in, which at the time I thought I was way farther along than I actually was. Like, I thought I was like halfway through. No, like if I was lucky, a quarter of the way through, I realized I had barely any paper covered, and I started panicking and was like, oh no, like what if I get through all the markers and I have like a half finished piece? Like, what do I do? That's a lot of work left. So I started using the markers a bit more heavily. And that really did like mess me up, especially with those greens. I covered pretty much all the green areas pretty early on and had so many green markers left that I just had to like layer here and there just to say that I used them. And then again at the end, I had pretty much the entire paper covered and didn't really need a bunch of gray tones. So I had to like really look for places to use them and basically use them as gap fillers and to line certain areas. And again, just kind of unnecessary layering. So I definitely couldn't completely avoid the pointless mark making issue, but I don't think it was nearly as bad as it could have been. Overall, I think the majority of the markers were used enough to make a difference on the piece. Maybe only 2 or 3 dozen markers were like barely used at all, so I'd say that's pretty darn good. This piece was a really interesting experience, both as a viewer and as the artist. It was really weird to watch the piece slowly take shape because I was approaching it in a way I've never really done before. It was so sporadic, just filling in tiny, tiny little shapes of color here and there around the paper. Watching that slowly take shape into figures and fruit and fabric was really crazy, especially because for a while, I was worried that it would be impossible to tell what was going on in the piece at all, because I was really focused on just blocking in areas and layering in this really unique way. I wasn't actually paying attention to form or making things look like things, you know? I wasn't drawing vegetables and fabric and people, I was just blocking in shapes of color. So to see those vegetables and fabric and people slowly take shape from that was really wild. Especially the rack of clothing in the far back near the top of the piece. I literally just blocked in random lines and like random lines and shapes. And I personally think it's actually pretty clear what that section is. And I didn't think it would be legible at all. So that's pretty cool. It was just crazy to see things take shape seemingly accidentally because I certainly wasn't purposefully doing it. I mean, I was, but I wasn't at the same time. I can't think of any other piece I've done that has visually developed in this way, like as I watched it take shape, so it was really cool to watch. And of course, it was weird because this process was basically the reverse of my regular process. Normally, I pick an area of a piece to work on and identify what colors I'll need, and after a certain amount of colors are picked, it kind of turns into my color palette and I stick with those. But for this, I was picking up a color at random and trying to find where that color belonged in a piece, and then laying it down in 1 or 2 spots, and using a huge array of colors. Working backwards like that was actually really hard, and I think that's partly why it took so long. I was really having to approach it from an entirely different angle, really having to think about the process rather than it coming naturally to me. This video was also different because this reference is kind of a new experience for me. Like I said in the intro, this is a photo of a Guatemalan street market, at least I believe it's a street market, and this reference is from Pinterest. I'll have that link down below. But it's super busy, there are a lot of figures in this piece, a lot going on, and it's an interesting perspective. Not really what I would consider to be in my comfort zone. The paper being larger is, I guess, not necessarily common for me, but I have really been enjoying working larger lately, so that's not too crazy. But yeah, this reference photo, it's a lot, you know, it's a lot. I honestly think that this approach was actually really good for me for this reference photo in particular. The thought of using my normal approach for this sounds so exhausting and difficult, and I think doing something new that kept my mind engaged and something that was more methodical was a great move. It kept me moving, kept me from idling, and forced me to move around the paper a lot. Whereas I feel like with my normal method, I could easily get stuck on one tiny area of this photo for a long time, trying to get it perfect and then never make any progress in the piece overall. This coloring method also kept me from getting too bogged down by details. I was much more concerned with being able to use every marker than I was with whether or not it looked just like the reference, or whether every face was drawn perfectly. And because there are so many figures, especially background figures, and so many elements, It was really nice to be forced to step away from detail, to not have to worry about that or focus on that too hard. There are blurry areas in the photo and in the background. I didn't have to worry about making that effect obvious or trying to decipher what it was I was looking at. I got to be super oblique and abstract and just block in random color in those places and not worry about whether or not it was true to the photo or accurate or legible at all. I was also a bit worried that I wouldn't actually be able to use every color, like as in this reference photo still wouldn't be colorful enough. But you know what? I made a really smart choice with this reference. Pretty much every saturated color was in this reference. It was the dark desaturated stuff that gave me some trouble. But this reference was honestly perfect. Even the neon stuff had its place. I think if I had picked any other reference that I hadn't purposely chosen to be colorful and vibrant, I would have had a really hard time. I can see why so many people do have to resort to layering and putting colors in random places just to use up the color. I was doing that on this giant piece with every possible color under the sun. I can only imagine that a generic landscape or portrait would be borderline impossible. So I'm definitely glad I went with this specific reference photo. I think it really saved the day. Overall, it was a difficult and tiring and interesting and fun process. I mean, 10 hours is a lot of time. I experienced a whole lot of emotions during the process. But as I got closer and closer to the finish line, watching the pile of remaining markers slowly dwindle, I got so excited to see the piece take shape and see the final product and finally be done. It did take 2 days. It's the next day, obviously. But I finally finished. I love the way it came out. I got halfway through ooh, I'm gonna hate this. But I actually love how it turned out. I think this piece does a great job of exemplifying how varied this set is in terms of saturation, tone. There's every marker you could possibly need here. This was really difficult. It was quite a challenge. I think it totaled 9 or 10 hours. I don't think I had a proper conception of what 320 markers is, and now I do. It's a lot. But yeah, I had a really great time. Like I said, it was difficult, it was a challenge, but it was a fun mental exercise as well, because I was using an approach I never have used before. And I got something out of it that I think is very different to my usual style and what I usually do, and I love it a lot. But yeah, that's it. That's the video. Thank you to Ohuhu for sponsoring this video and sending me the markers. I love Ohuhu. If you haven't tried their markers, I definitely recommend you try them out and take advantage of their Black Friday deal. Now is a great time to get yourself some markers. Thank you for watching. I hope you enjoyed. Like, comment, subscribe. You know the deal. Go eat a snack, wash your hands, and go do smart.